Well, welcome. We're a little bit early, but I think we'll get a start. And first of all, can I welcome all of you here from, James was just asking me who was here today, and I was trying to explain the diversity of the Keele community that is represented here today, and it's a real pleasure to see all of you here. But I should add a particular welcome to James' wife and father and two of his colleagues, and certainly to the two colleagues you will meet, I think, a little bit later on. This really isn't something that happens very often in the university. This is only the 5th time we've had to do this at Keele, install a new Chancellor. And so it's a very special day for us and a very historic day for the university. And you know, following the formal installation process that we have just held in the chapel, it's certainly my great pleasure to introduce the 5th Chancellor of Keele University, James Timpson OBE. And since his appointment was announced, there really has been genuine excitement right across the university. And in fact, one of the biggest challenges that James is going to have, that we are going to have for James, is that there are so many different parts of the university that align themselves with the things that James does, but actually, more importantly, I think, the way that James does things, that they all want a bit of you, and they all want you to be part of what they do. So we're going to have to control that very carefully, making sure that we don't impose too much on your time, but also, I'm sure, giving you that experience of meeting a broad number of people around campus, because I think that will be part of the fun of the job, apart from anything else. Now, I'm not going to repeat the excellent oration that Professor Lee gave in the installation ceremony, but I think it is worth mentioning one or two things that did lead us to inviting James to be our new Chancellor. Many of you will know that the Timson family name and the company brand is strongly associated with a strong commercial success. But that is linked to values that see all employees as colleagues, and where trust, flexibility, and a level of independence sit alongside a very clear expectation of accountability. And these do make Timson's quite rightly recognised as one of the best companies in the UK to actually work for. James has been CEO of Timson since 2013, and this came after a period of 10 or 11 years as managing director. He is, in fact, the 5th generation of his family to lead the business, and working with his father, he's maintained and developed that ethos that I've just mentioned, including by taking a particular approach to the employment of ex-prisoners, providing support and opportunities at Timson's that really can set them up for a new life outside prison. At a national level, James has been chair of the Employers Forum for Reducing Reoffending. He's helped develop Employment Advisory Board in more than 40 prisons. He chairs the Prison Reform Trust and is very much a thought leader in how offenders need to be supported in order to change their lives. There is much, much more I could say about James, not least the accolades that he's received, an OBE, his trusteeship of the Tate, the Albert Medal from the Royal Society of Art, just to mention just a small selection. But you're all here to listen to him and not to me. So at that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our 5th Chancellor of Keele University, who will now deliver his talk to you, James Timpson OBE. Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So what I thought I would do is talk for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, something like that, and then we'll do a Q&A, and I'm going to ask a couple of my colleagues, Anthony and Darren, to come up on stage as well, because I'm sure you'll probably want to ask them more questions than you want to ask me. But before I start, I want to say thank you very much to everybody who's been involved in today for setting up the ceremony earlier on, which I thought was wonderful, and also for organising this lecture, and thanks so much for you all coming. Hopefully, some of you may have shopped in our shops over the years and experienced things, but when I talk about, so I'm going to talk about the business, but really I'm not talking about cutting keys or repairing shoes. I'm going to talk about how we do it and how we run the business. And when I talk about it, I don't want you to think that I've come up with all these ideas. I haven't at all. I work with 4,500 wonderful colleagues who give most of the ideas that we use in the business. And also, my dad and myself, we've been running the business together you've been doing it for 60 years. And I only got my 25 years service last year. So it's very much a joint effort by lots and lots of people. And we don't always get it right. There are we do actually have a department of 7 colleagues who do customer complaints every day. So I don't want you to think that everything is wonderful and marvelous, but we try and ensure that things work really well. So I thought I'd just start by I remember many years ago, Rasheen and I went to a business talk similar to this, and it was by a guy who'd written a book called The 7 Deadly Sins of Business. And basically what he was saying is, if you do the 7 deadly sins really well, you'll be really successful. So, you don't need to pay people very well. You don't need to look after people very well. You need to make as much money as you can and then get out and make lots of money. Well, that may work for him, although I did notice that when I Googled this book the other day, it is no longer on Amazon, so I don't know whether it wasn't a very good seller. But I don't think that's the way to run any organisation. And when I talk about a business, I mean any organisation. It could be the local football team, the scout group, the council, the university, or a chain of shops. So just to give you a bit of background on our business, it's a family business. We're based in Wythenshawe in Manchester, right by Wythenshawe Hospital. And we've got 2,100 little shops, the majority of which are Timson. Then we also have a chain of photo shops called Max Spielman. We have another chain down in London which is called Snappy Snaps. And then we've got Johnson's of Cleaners, and we have a locksmith service, and we do lots of sort of vending operations. And we also have 3 restaurants and a hotel that Rasheen runs. So it's a very sort of diverse group, but it doesn't matter what part of the business you work in, we run it the same way, and we want it to feel the same way. Now, when it comes to our style of doing things, lots of people look at our business from the outside and think we're all Mr. Nice Guys, that everything is, we're just generous to everybody and everything's marvelous and smells of roses. It's not like that. We're really hard. We're pretty hard commercially because we want very, very high standards in everything that we do. So it's sort of this mixture of, it's very cuddly, but in other parts of it, it's pretty hard. And the reason why we do it like that is because I believe it's the most successful way of running an organisation. It's most commercially successful, people really enjoy working there, and we have this sort of long-term success, so we just keep doing the same thing. Now, when you look at lots of other businesses you read about in the papers, they are run completely differently than the way we run things. And the government are always trying to put in new rules and processes to stop the odd rogue business, the Maxwells and the Enrons happening. But actually, most people run businesses in a similar way to us, in organisations in a similar way to us. They want to work with lovely people. They want to fulfil their ambitions. They want everyone to be happy. But there are different ways of doing that. So, if you're a pilot, really it's all about following the rules. You don't want a pilot who's like me. I'd be a disaster at being a pilot because I don't really like rules. I wouldn't be very good working in government because I'm not risk averse. I like risk, and also I'm involved with Tate's galleries and everything. I chair a couple of boards at Tate, and I always talk about Tate time. Tate time is always 10 minutes late. Everything happens 10 minutes late, but Timson time is always on time. So I was delighted, Trevor, that we started today on time. So the Timson story is something that started in 1865, where my great-great-grandfather, John's great-grandfather, left his village just outside Kettering and was sent to Manchester to go and work with a relative. Was it his brother-in-law? His brother. But he'd never been on a train before, so he got on the wrong train, and the story goes that he ended up spending the night on a platform at Sheffield train station. And he had no money, so slept on the station that night. And he was only because of the generosity of a very nice man who gave him the money to get to Manchester that he managed to go there and start working, selling shoes and shoelaces and the retail story went from there. So there's always been this story about generosity and kindness in the business, and it was run very much as a family business, where it was all about visiting the stores, making sure everyone was treated as part of the family, and it developed from shoe shops to shoe repair shops, and then everything was going pretty well until the 1970s, when the family was very dispersed. I wouldn't say the family always got on, and my grandfather, John's father, was fired basically by his cousin, and then it was a very difficult time. Anyway, the business was sold, and John managed to buy the business back, the shoe shops back, and in 1987 sold a shoe retail business. So ever since then, we've been a chain of cobbler shops, but we've grown the number of shops we've got, and we've also diversified into other areas. So we've gone from being a family business to not being a family business to being very much a family business. And when we talk about being a family business, there are 4,500 colleagues who are part of our family. So that's our sort of story of how we've done it. But the ideas that we've implemented in the business come from the colleagues within it, but also we've stolen loads from other people. So I spent a long time in America, going around different businesses in Europe, and just writing to people saying, could I spend a day hanging around with you, carrying your briefcase, so I can learn what you do from other business leaders, people who did interesting jobs in interesting sectors. And most people said yes. So I spent hours and days in completely different businesses from shoe repair shops, but nicking ideas about how they led. And there was this consistency between the businesses that I really respected and the way they did things. It was all about having strong values around a culture of trust and kindness. It was consistently across the board. So from Southwest Airlines in America, which was sort of the pioneering EasyJet model, when I went there and walked around their buildings for a couple of days, they were exactly the same kind of people that I work alongside. The culture was exactly the same. John and I went to this wonderful business in Helsinki called Sol, where they do office cleaning. And again, exactly the same kind of people. They run it on trust and kindness. And so that's always been our sort of long-term vision around how do we create this culture that's going to be successful for the long term, and it's a culture that we really want to work in, we would really enjoy. Because when you have a long-term view on something, you run it completely differently, rather than, if I went into to run a business and my goal was to get in and out in 3 years, I'd run it completely differently than the way we do now. But for us, it's simple. It's about having very, very strong values and a culture that's based on trust and kindness. So the only problem about that, sounds great, but how do you actually do it? How do you implement it? Well, the first place you've got to start is on recruitment. You've got to recruit people who get it, people who are the sort of people that will thrive within your culture. And not everybody wants to work in retail. In fact, I'm probably the only person in our whole business who left school wanting to be a cobbler. People just fell into it. It was not something that they really planned to do. So we needed to find a way to recruit people who would get it and who would really flourish in our business. And we realized that for us, a CV is a complete waste of time. We want to recruit people who have a thing that you can't really spot on an online CV filtering service, which is, what is their personality? We want people who are fun, interesting, engaging, sparky, a bit eccentric, a bit odd. That's absolutely fine. We don't want people who are dull, who are miserable, who are unreliable, and are dishonest. Because my colleagues only want to work with people who are as wonderful as they are. And I feel one of the main roles in leadership is to make sure that my amazing colleagues only work alongside people who are as amazing as they are. And the way we class that, the way we do it is very simply, there's no sort of proper training in this. If you were all area managers in our business, we'd simply put up a film of 10 to 20 interviews for, say, a delivery driver for Amazon. And we'd do a 2-minute clip for each of them, and we'd ask you to rate each of them out of 10, just from what you've heard on the interview. And they may be talking about their hobbies or where they last went on holiday. And all the time, we're trying to work out what their personality is. So if this was a Timson training centre, you'd be given a piece of paper and you'd write by each name what mark you'd give them out of 10. Now, we can all spot the 9s and 10s out of 10. They're the ones we all want. They're sparky, they're fun, they're interesting, they've got a lot about them, they've got an energy about them, they look you in the eye. They're the sort of people you want to work alongside. We can also always spot the 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s and 5s because their best isn't good enough for us. They may be wonderful working somewhere else, but we don't want them to work with us. The danger zone is the 6s, 7s and 8s because they can do the job, but if we had a magic wand, their best isn't good enough. So the problem all organisations have, especially at the moment when recruitment is so difficult, we have 104 vacancies in our business at the moment, which we've never had anything like that in the past before COVID, is when you're desperate to recruit, you'll often recruit someone who's a 6, 7 or 8. And they're the ones that mean that you need HR departments because they're the ones that cause the problems. Now, when it comes to recruitment, all we do is we always want to recruit because we will recruit even though we don't have any vacancies. We want a waiting list of brilliant people who want to work for us, but unfortunately we don't have a vacancy. So I would say in about half our businesses at the moment we have a waiting list. Before COVID, we had waiting lists everywhere, apart from Kent. Kent is always, I don't know any of you from Kent, Kent is always very, very difficult to recruit from. But what we do is we interview someone for 10 minutes, listen, we don't even look at their CV, and if we think they're a 9 or a 10 out of 10, offer them a job on the spot. If we don't have a job available, they go on a waiting list. 6, 7s and 8s, sorry, not for us. But one of the reasons why we go around our shops visiting them all the time is to spot whether they really are recruiting 9s and 10s, or are they dipping into the I'm desperate pot of the 6, 7s and 8s. And when we do, we need to challenge to see, can we give those colleagues an opportunity to improve, or do we have a problem? Because all of our colleagues are promoted from within, apart from IT and finance, but essentially our business has evolved by recruiting everybody from within the business. So Sid, who runs the Timson business, joined us when he was 14, working as a Saturday boy in our Brixton shop, because it's quite funny actually. We don't have the shop there anymore because basically John was too scared to go there in the late 80s. It was a pretty terrifying place. It was just around the corner from the tube shop. So and Saturdays in those days used to be very busy days, and the manager needed a bit of protection, so he needed an extra person there. So we got 14-year-old little Sid. And anyway, he's still with us. He's still with us today. But this is where it came to us recruiting people from prison. Because we're only interested in personality, we don't really care what has happened in the past. And over the years, we've recruited people from prison I've known about. We've had colleagues who've gone to the police station for the weekend because they've been fighting and so on, and went to pick them up and they carried on as normal. And I'm sure there were lots of people who had been to prison that had lied in their application form, but they were really good colleagues. So I think it was, I can't remember how many years ago now, 16 years ago, I was invited to Thorncross Prison, which is just outside Warrington. And in those days, it was a Cat D open YOI. So that means the lowest category, open prison, so no walls around it, and it was full of young offenders, so 18 to 21-year-old men. And I went round just fascinated, because if any of you haven't been to a prison, I guarantee if you're offered to go to a prison, you'll all say yes, because you want to see what it's really like. And I actually find them very inspiring places now, but the first time I went, it was quite daunting. But I was met by this guy called Matthew, who was 19. He was doing a 2-year sentence for ABH, actual bodily harm. On his 18th birthday, he just finished his A-levels, and he went to Mr. Smith's nightclub in Warrington, which I suspect some of you, hands up who's been to Mr. Smith's, quite a lot of you here. And anyway, he got into a fight over a girl, and he got a 4-year sentence, so serving 2 years, and he couldn't go to university. I wasn't sure, in fact, I should ask him now, because he's still with us today, which university he went to, but I thought he was great. His personality was fantastic, and I asked him what he was doing when he was going to leave prison. He said, I ain't got a clue who's going to take someone on with a criminal record. So I thought, well, you're perfect. So I gave him my business card and said, when you're out, give me a ring, and I'll give you a job. Didn't think anything of it, and then about 6 months later, I got a phone call from his mother saying, Matthew's out tomorrow, he's trying to get a job, no one will take him on, can you help? So, of course we can. So I took him on, and he's been brilliant ever since then. And ironically, he runs the shop that's nearest the prison where he is, you know, from Thorncourt. He's in the Morrisons just down the road from here. So I thought, well, if I can get someone like Matthew, why can't I get a few more? Because I'm giving someone a second chance, and they're a really good colleague. So that's when, every Friday afternoon, I used to go around the prisons in the northwest, walk around the wings with the governor, looking for sparky prisoners. And I didn't tell anybody. My dad knew what I was doing, but no one else, the machine knew, but no one else knew what I was doing. And literally, I just walked around the wings and just talking to as many men and women as I could speak to. And just, if I thought they were sparky, give them my card. Anyway, I managed to get to about 8. We had a couple of wobbles along the way. I learned that it's not a good idea to pay off someone's drug dealer because it keeps coming back. I learned lots of lessons on what worked and what didn't work. But we got to a point where we had enough success stories to tell everybody in the business what we'd done. So we got all the leadership team together, and I said, listen, just want to let you know, Tony in Old Swan, he actually came through prison and so on and so on. And the reaction was, these people are fantastic, please go and get me some more. Then the other reaction, which was a quieter reaction over the next couple of weeks, was a number of my senior colleagues coming to me to say, I'm really pleased you're doing this, because when I was younger, I got criminal conviction, and I've still never told anybody, and I'm worried if I do tell anybody, then I'm going to get sacked. That's why I couldn't go on the business trip to America with you, because Americans don't let anybody in with criminal convictions and so on. So I sort of knew I was onto a bit of a winner. And then I said, right, let's aim to get 50 people from prison to work in the business. And it was much easier then because everybody knew what we were doing. And a number of my colleagues really embraced it and were going into prisons themselves and learning how the whole process worked and how to find the best people there. But one of the problems is that when people are in prison, they aren't given the skills to know what to do when they're out so far as work, and even more specifically, how to be a cobbler, a key cutter, and a watch repairer. So I kept going. Whenever you go around on a prison tour, if you're not wise to it, they'll just show you the things they want to show you. I'm sure it's like when I came for my first day here, Trevor, I was shown the things that you wanted to show me. But I always ask now to see the things they don't want to show me, because that's actually a lot more interesting. But the workshops in prisons, when you actually go and have a look at the workshops they don't want to show you, they're pretty uninspiring places. So I said that I was in Liverpool prison one day, which is a tough prison. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll set up a workshop here. We could do a much better job. So 6 months later, lots of red tape to get round. We opened up our first Timson training academy in a prison. And we did shoe repairs. We weren't, funny enough, allowed to do key cutting in a Cat B, quite high security prison. But we did engraving, watch repairs. And at lunchtime, we had a little counter, so the prison staff who worked there would come in and get their shoes repaired, and our colleagues there would get the practice of serving them. And that worked really, really well. Then we opened up another one in Wandsworth, which was an absolute disaster, not because the prisoners we were working with weren't any good, it's because the culture of the prison just was impossible for us to get round. So we closed that one, and now we have a number, in Thorncross Prison, we've actually got 3 now, and we've got other ones in Newhall and in Downview, both women's prisons for our Max Spielman business. So we sort of got on a roll of finding all these great people from prison. And then other companies started to say to us, well, you know, we've heard what you're doing, we'd be quite interested in recruiting people from prison too. And it was normally because they had a recruitment problem. They couldn't find enough people. So that's when we started helping other companies do it. And it was also at the same time that we started to get quite a bit of bad press about recruiting people from prison. Now, we never recruit sex offenders. We never recruit people who've got health issues that working in our business will be really unhelpful for them. We're recruiting for probably, I would say, 20 to 30% of the people leaving prison. That's the sort of people that we want. Most of them are over the age of 25. Most of them have been in prison more than once. So we started helping these people recruit from prison, but we had this problem that we had the Daily Mail, the Sun, and the Star kept just trying to trip us up all the time. The worst headline we had was, Killer Cobbler Cuts Keys in Belfast. We had lots of lags and keys and all this sort of stuff, but we decided just to completely ignore it and ride it out. And what actually happened, and this was we didn't have a PR strategy around this. What actually happened is that more customers came to us because of what we did than avoided us because of what we did. And even now, so many customers go into our shops thinking that everybody in the business was recruited from prison. But actually, it's about 12% of my colleagues were recruited from prison. But I think because we stuck to our guns, it's now become a really normal thing. And sort of 10 years ago, the Ministry of Justice kept saying to me, how can we get more companies to employ people from prison? And I said, well, let's start off with the Ministry of Justice. Why don't you employ people from prison? So the good news is the Ministry of Justice now employ 1,100 people with prison experience. And if you speak to any of the senior civil servants in the Ministry of Justice, they'll say that's the best thing they've ever done, because the user voice, the prisoner experience, is far more powerful than them helping them devise policy and operating practices around that. So our prison journey, and maybe that's something we'll come on to in our Q&A, has become not just a passion of mine and my colleagues who are here today. It's become something that I think has really helped the colleagues in our business, because they've enjoyed working for a business that has more of a purpose than just making money. It's far more satisfying if you are a leader of a business, you are an area manager, you are a manager of a shop, working alongside someone who's been in prison for some time and seeing them thrive, seeing them be home to read their kids' bedtime stories, seeing them be able to go on holiday, to be able to treat themselves to things and to live a normal life. And that's why I think running a business is not about making money. Running a business is about having values. And if you have really strong values that you're consistently ramming through the organisation, it's amazing what you can achieve. So we'll come on to the prison bit later on. But there are other things that you need to develop a culture of kindness and trust. And the first one is really, how do you trust people to do their job really well? Lots of organisations have lots of rules and guidelines in place to stop the odd idiot being an idiot. But the problem is, the 95% of people who aren't idiots have to abide by all those rules and processes and guidelines. And the problem with the guidelines is everyone thinks they're probably a rule, but I'm not sure whether I can break it or not, so you end up with hundreds of rules. Well, we don't really like rules at all. So in our business, we only have two. You put the money in the till, which still colleagues find difficult to work out sometimes. And the other is you look the part. So that's, you turn up on time, Timson time. In the Timson shops, you wear a tie, unless it's very hot. We have a tiometer in the back of the shops. When it goes over a certain temperature, you can take your tie off. So very specific about that. You're polite to customers. You don't eat in the shop, smoke in the shop, or have the radio on. The rest, you can do whatever you like. You're an adult. You are part of our family. We trust you to do whatever you think is right. So that's why when you go in our shops, it feels a bit like a franchise. It feels more entrepreneurial, because they can charge what they like. We have a price list. We don't want them to charge any more than that, but they can do discounts and haggle. And I would say probably in your shop, 20% of colleagues maybe get a bit of a discount on something, or maybe less, maybe 10% in yours. About 30% in yours. Because we don't want to lose a customer, but we don't want our colleagues to lose any of their bonus either. So they can order whatever stock they want. They can do their displays however they want. They can go to the loo whenever they want. It's amazing in an Amazon warehouse, you get told when you have to go to the toilet. I mean, I think it's unbelievable. So we believe in trusting people, but when you trust people, you have to have very clear rules, so everybody knows what the deal is. And for us, the deal's really simple. Put the money in the till and look the part. The rest, you can do whatever you want. And we've always been really consistent in this culture. Now, some people join our business and find that really difficult. They like to be in an organisation where they have loads and loads of rules to follow. They feel safe within the rule structure, but they normally don't last very long with us. The other thing that's really important as part of our culture is saying goodbye to people who we don't think are going to be happy working with us and will be happy elsewhere. Now, this is something that a lot of organisations really struggle with. But as I said earlier on, I don't want my amazing colleagues to work with people who aren't good enough. So it's our job to really force this conversation. And lots of people don't like having those difficult conversations. So we spend a lot of time training our area managers and our area teams in how you have those difficult conversations. So one of the things that I'm really proud of is lots of people who we help leave the business say that we've done it in a very kind and considerate way because that's part of our values, but actually they didn't really like the job, it wasn't really for them, and they're really glad that they found something else. So we see it as a very positive thing to ask those people who are a 6, 7 and 8 to find their happiness elsewhere, and that's a really important part of our culture. The other is that we have to share the success, and that means everybody needs an incentive to go for it. Every organisation needs a drug, and in an academic organisation it may well be the research that you're producing, the grades that your students get, how you do in the league tables compared to other people. In our business, it's called the weekly bonus. It's the financial incentive that drives our business. And the reason when you go into Ant's shop and you say, could I have a key cut? And he says, well, that's £8 for one, £12 for two. The reason why he's selling and the reason why we're always there pushing it is because they want their commission. And it's a wonderful scheme my dad invented years and years ago, which is very simple, which is if you and I are working in a shop in a week, we add up our basic wages together, times it by 4.5, and that sets the sales target for the week. Anything over that, we get 15%. So there's two incentives working, that's all. One is to keep the wages as low as possible, because most organisations, everyone says, we need more people. I can only do that if I have more people. But in our organisation, they say, I can actually do it without them. So that's why lots of our shops only have one colleague in. And the other is that they have a weekly target to go for every week. And lots of organisations have yearly targets, quarterly targets. We feel that a weekly target is the one that really drives sales and performance. The next thing that we do, so we've got this culture of trust. We're recruiting people who've got an amazing personality. We say goodbye to those people whose best isn't good enough for us, and we give everybody a real incentive to go for it. And the next part of it is how we measure how happy our colleagues are. And the reason why I use the word colleagues is because language is very important to us. The reason why we don't use staff or employee is we believe everybody is equal. No one is more important than anybody else. That's why everybody is a colleague. And we need to make sure that we measure happiness. So we have two ways of doing that. Every week, on a Thursday night, when Ant is filling out his end-of-week paperwork, because as an unusual business, our week finishes on a Thursday night, long story. But there's a question that says, on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you? And last week's average score was 8.4. Around about half our colleagues reply. So what we're interested in is measuring all the time how individual colleagues are. So that'll go to Ant's area manager. And if Ant's always scoring himself a 10, 10, 10, 10, then one week he goes down to a 4, it's the area manager's job to find out what we can do to support. And often it's nothing to do with work, it's something to do with things away from work. So that's what we measure every week. And then every April, we have the Happy Index, which is our annual colleague survey. Now, lots of you probably have filled out colleague surveys over the years, and you have hundreds of questions to answer. We do 1. On a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you with your boss? So this is where our bosses get judged. And there's a space for a comment as well. And our area managers are wonderful people. They earn lots of money. They have lots of responsibility. But if they score badly in the Happy Index, they won't be an area manager for very long. Because their job is not financial performance, but to ensure that their colleagues are happy. So when they turn up for work in the morning, they're not trying to make us a load of money. They're trying to make sure that their colleagues are happy. Because we know if our colleagues are happy, they will perform really well, and they'll happen to make money for us. Don't start off trying to get everyone to make money. Start off by trying to make sure that everyone is happy. So how do you do that? There are so many parts of a culture. All cultures that you've been involved with are all intricate and have been built up over many, many years. But we have a number of benefits that we think is a real driver for this. So if you were to come to us for an interview, we'd talk about the benefits, and the benefits, because we don't pay Wayne Rooney level of wages or Ronaldo wages. It's a generous business, but it's a retail wage plus bonus. So That's why we have the days off. So we copied the days off. A friend of ours used to run Millie's Cookies, and he gave everyone their birthday off as an extra day off. So that was a great idea. So we nicked that. So then I thought, when the kids have, when our colleagues' kids have their first day at school, they really want to be at school with their kids. So let's give them another day off for that. Oh, then what about when you become a granny or a grandpa? You want an extra day off for that, don't you, to go and spend a day with your grandparent? And now we even have pet bereavement days, which is not for when your goldfish dies, it's for when the proper pet dies. But all that sort of stuff is important. The reason why we have 20 holiday homes where colleagues go on free holiday is because they love it. And I know it makes them happy. And their families, who really support them coming to work every day, also go and enjoy the holiday homes with them. Dreams Come True was a great idea my dad thought of. How many years ago? 10 years ago? Something like that, probably. And colleagues can write in to see if we can make their dream come true. I don't want any associations with Jim will fix it, by the way. It's nothing like that. James will fix it. It's our dreams come true. And you would have thought that people would maybe take advantage of their dreams. You know, I want to go with my mates for a week in Ibiza. It's not like that at all. Last week, I paid for someone's new teeth, someone's garden to be done up, and a colleague wanted to buy an engagement ring to propose to her boyfriend. So it's a different way around. So dreams come true. And again, colleagues write in, if they're on, if they've already got 4 written warnings and they've been with us 6 months, they probably won't get their dream come true. Or if they had one last year and the year before, they probably won't have it made again. But we want all of our colleagues to have their dreams come true. So for us, the money we invest, about £1 million a year, in Dreams Come True, is a privilege of leadership because you're rewarding those who've helped the business be successful. We also do lots of loans, and we pay off people's debts, and we sort of gift money, and we seem to pay for lots of funerals, because funerals are an expense that lots of colleagues didn't expect. Extra week off for a wedding and £100 towards the flowers, and we have a weekly lottery as well where a colleague wins £1,000 tax paid. We do say, this is slightly Chatham House rules on this one, we do say it's a random lottery, but it's not random at all. We actually pick the colleague who we think would really appreciate and their family would really benefit from a bit of a pick-me-up. So it's not quite straightforward, though, running all this sort of stuff. And that's why we have a number of colleagues whose job is to make sure that all this part of the culture works. So that's why we have Janet, our Director of Happiness, who's full. So when I asked her to take on this role of Director of Happiness, she thought it would be a bit of a 1 day a week, 2 days a week. It's a 7-day-a-week job, because actually most of her time is spent making sure that the benefits that we have are being used, but also the colleagues who really need support get that support. So she looks after all of our mental health first aiders, our full-time counsellor, and all the support we give too. And the other thing that works as part of our business is communication. And we're always trying to improve our communication, because there are always colleagues in our business that say, no one ever tells me what's going on. And I'm sure you've had that in all your organisations as well. No one ever tells me what's going on. So we have a weekly newsletter, which has been going for 20 years, which is 16 pages. I do a weekly 3-minute WhatsApp video that goes to every colleague. Area teams do weekly newsletters and so on, but you can never stop telling people what's going on, and you might as well tell everybody everything rather than manage expectations. I'm a big believer in tell everybody what's going on, and that was never more true than during COVID, when we had to send everybody home. Our business closed. When I said, the day it closed, I sent a message to everybody to say, don't worry, I'll pay you 100% of your pay for however long it takes, thinking it'd be 3 weeks. 12 weeks later, £20 million lost, but we kept going because it was very much part of our values. And also we learned a lot more there about communication, about just tell everyone the bad news, they know what's going on. So I think it's easy for everyone to be told good news, but it's also important for people to be told bad news too. And then just going back to my point on equality. In our business, no one is more important than anybody else. We have no reserved parking spaces, we have no signs saying staff only, everyone's a colleague, and it's really important that the language that we have and the way we communicate with colleagues keeps reiterating that. But sometimes we find that leaders like to start imposing rules and changing this and sort of imposing their personality to try and get favour or or to get a result from someone. And that's when we jump on it really, really heavily. And that's why we spend a lot of time going around the shops, meeting colleagues and finding out what's going on. So in our organisation, I spend my time here with my leadership team and here on the front line with the colleagues in the shops. I don't really bother with the middle bit of the organisation because I'm looking for examples of where our leaders are not leading in the way we want them to lead. They're not fulfilling the values and the culture that we have. And it's very interesting that I would say our most successful leaders in the business are the kindest, but they're also the toughest. They're not the ones that give everyone the holidays they want or give everyone the pay rises they want. It's the ones who are the fairest, communicate the best, and know their people. And one of the keys about leadership is knowing your people. And it's not just about knowing their career. It's about knowing where they last went on holiday, what their kids are called, when their wedding anniversary is, and all those things that make up someone's career in a business. It's not just about the work. In fact, we haven't even spoken about repairing shoes or developing photos here today. It's not about that. It's about people, and you need to understand people away from work to understand how you can help them in work. But where else would this kind of culture work? Well, it certainly doesn't work in the prison service. So I thought I'd just talk for a couple of minutes about the prison service. There is little kindness in prisons. There are wonderful examples of kindness, but unfortunately it doesn't happen enough. And there are a number of men and women who I've met in prison that will say that a prison officer changed their life. A prison officer who took time to talk to them and really mentored them changed their life. But there are also lots of examples of where it hasn't been as good. Let me give you a couple of examples. Sentencing. So there's a big problem in this country around sentencing. And it's because governments of all colours seem to want to sentence people to prison for longer for the same crimes. And this is despite there being no evidence anywhere in the world that says if you increase the sentence for actual bodily harm, people will commit less actual bodily harm. But what actually happens is there are more and more people in prison. There are actually fewer people going to prison, but they're going to prison for much longer, which means that we are having to warehouse men, predominantly with 96% of the prison population are men, warehouse these people in prisons that are overcrowded, where they don't get the opportunity for education or training, and they come out and the world has changed. There are many colleagues we've recruited from prison who've never used a mobile phone before, have no idea what a mouse is, the thing you use your computer with, and they're not equipped for life at all. And as sentencing is getting even more harsher, it's going to get even worse. And we've got IP prisoners, and I won't get into all the details of it, but we have a real problem in this country. We sentence people, we're harsher sentences than any other country in Europe, and it means that we are just alienating a minority of people who fail society, but also society has failed them, and they're not getting the opportunity to live a normal life when they're out. There are 112 people in prison at the moment who are never going to be released. There are 86,000 other people who are going to be released, and we need to make sure that they have somewhere to live, someone who's going to look out for them, and a job, because if you have those three things, you won't go back. But the longer you are sentenced for, and a lot of those people are young men, the longer you are sentenced to go to prison, the less likelihood it is for you to live a normal life when you go out. But there are other ways of doing it. If you go to Holland, the Dutch prison model, they've actually closed half their prisons because they've changed the way they sentence. The people in Holland are no less naughty than they are in the UK, but they just get punished in a different way. Instead of being punished to go to prison and away from your family and you lose your job for years on end, they often go on tag, and for a lot of crimes, they serve part-time prison sentences. So if you take death by dangerous driving, which over here you'll probably get 5 to 7 years, maybe 10 years. The Dutch model is you will go on tag, every weekend you'll go into prison, and instead of going on your holidays for 4 weeks a year, you go into prison. But when you're in prison, you're doing proper work. You're not just sitting there on your PlayStation. You are helping other prisoners. You are being part of the prison community to serve your punishment, but also to help you in your future life. Bizarrely, in Holland now, the prisons are being rented out to the Belgians and the Germans because they've got too many prisoners, so they're actually renting out the prisons because they just don't need them. And by the way, in Holland, crime is going down faster than it is anywhere else in Europe. And then if you look at how prisons actually work in the UK, where they're overcrowded, a lot of the time prisoners aren't getting social time, they're not learning to manage their own time, and they're basically treated like children. Their food is provided for them, they have to fill out forms to be able to get permission to do anything, and they're not given any responsibility. If you take and I was talking to someone earlier on, Rasheen and I a few years ago went to Norway to have a look at the prisons over there. And if you want to be a prison officer in Norway, you go to university for 3 years before you even go into a prison. Over here, it's an 8-week course. I've been in prisons in the UK where there are 18-year-old men, boys, running wings in tough jails. There's no way that they're not going to be able to do that job very well. But there are other models to do it, but you can never have a Norwegian-type model where prisoners are treated with respect, they're greeted at the gate with a handshake from the governor, and that the politics is taken out of the way prisons are run. And if I could wave a magic wand, I would just change 2 things. Although I can't change the sentencing environment in the UK, so at the moment, if I got a 10-year sentence and I was well behaved, I'd be released after 5 years, and then I'd be on licence for another 5 years. I would just like to cut that in half, so I'd be out in 2.5 years, because there's no evidence to suggest that the extra 2.5 years I'd serves any benefit to anybody. It just costs the state a lot more money and clogs up the prisons. And the other thing that I would do is I would, because that would reduce the size of the prison population. By the way, COVID was really good for prisons. Sorry, for prison population. It was terrible for people in prison, but it's great because the courts didn't work, so the prison numbers have gone right down. But I would adopt the Norwegian model, which is really invest in the people who are in prison. There's a reason why they're there. They've broken the law, but they're often broken people. And they need help. What they don't need is for the situation to be made worse. So that's my magic wand for the prison service. We're doing a huge amount of work on helping people get jobs on release, and I know there's a number of conversations that we've had, and I'm also hoping to spend time in my role as Chancellor here talking to specifically the criminology students about all the fascinating stuff around prisons and justice. But if I could wave a magic wand, I would have far more kindness within the culture of prisons. So at that note, what I'm going to do is just sort of sum up instead of my 7 deadly sins, I'm going to have my 7 acts of kindness I'd like to happen. The first is organisations trust people. You recruit people who are virtually always adults because you think they're really good, so trust them to do a really good job. The other thing is we all want to work alongside people who are nice and kind and who get it. The next one is everybody is treated equally. It doesn't matter how long you've worked in the organisation, how much you're paid, everybody should be treated equally. And we should share in the benefits of success. It doesn't have to be money, but everybody needs to feel rewarded for the success we contribute to. And there's also more to salary than money. The benefits that we give our colleagues is the best money that we spend. And even when COVID hit and we were losing all this money and we thought we were going to go bust, we never stopped the benefits and all the other things that go with it, the birthdays off and everything, because that's really, really important. Help people when help is needed. We are not a charity, but we give more charity than most charities do for our colleagues. Because we recruited someone who's fantastic, they have a wobble, normally the wobble is nothing to do with work, it's our job to support them. And I would say probably over half of our colleagues at some point have had a wobble, and in most businesses they would have been fired or left, and we've supported them and they're still with us and thriving and we've trusted them. And the last my last act of kindness is treat people once in a while to something that they never expected. A dream come true, or a special gift, a letter, a cheque, an extra week off to celebrate something special. Because if you give kindness to a colleague, they will probably give kindness to a customer too. So hopefully when you go into one of our shops, you please talk to one of our colleagues. Maybe they joined us through the foundation, but talk to them about our culture, and maybe you will hopefully hear from them what you've heard from me. So on that note, I'm going to ask Darren and Anthony to come up on stage, and we're going to do some questions, if that's okay. Thank you. I'll introduce you first. Yeah, if you stand here. Darren, you come around here. So what I'd like to do is for Anthony and Darren just to introduce yourselves. Darren, you start off. Tell us what you do, how long you've worked for us, and what the role is.
Okay, I'm sure if this is on. Obviously not. Hello, testing? No, I'll shout. Okay, so my name's Darren. I think I've got the coolest job in the world, so I get to take care of the Timson Foundation for James and the business generally. So what that means practically is that I kind of oversee the recruitment of our ex-offender colleagues or colleagues who are marginalised in some way, who face barriers to employment. So predominantly ex-offenders, but also people with diverse needs, people with mental health issues, people who are neurodiverse, ex-military people, long-term unemployed people. So yeah, very interesting job, get to meet lots of great people.
Thank you.
My name's Anthony, I've been with the company since 2013. Hello, my name's Anthony, I've been with the company since 2013. I'm a life sentence prisoner and I'm on life licence. I did get recalled back to prison on a false allegation for 10 months, the worst 10 months of my whole life. But James kept my job open for me and I've been back with the company since 2015. I work in the local shop at Trent Vale. I'm at top of the company on customer service. It's like James says about the values, put kindness first and my customers keep coming back. I love my job to bits. I didn't get the best start in life. Both of my parents were really bad, severe alcoholics. My mum drank through a pregnancy and my brother was born with cerebral palsy, 2 years younger than me. So as a kid, I never felt any love. Growing up, because I never dealt with any of that anger or resentment, I carried it with me throughout all my life. I became a survivalist where I dug into skips. And then I went to prison on a murder charge for 18 years. When I got out, I didn't think I'd get a job. I applied for so many jobs and kept getting knockbacks. I kept getting discrimination from companies. But I knew Timpson's employed people who had been through the prison system. I applied and I got the job. The day I applied, an area manager came out to me and said, "You've got the personality for the job." And I started the very next day.
Well done. Okay, so we've got 15 minutes for some questions. So happy to have questions on anything.
Any questions? We have got a roving mic. Any advice? Over, Sheila.
I was simply amazed to hear the last speaker, because this is the gentleman that mended some shoes for me, and he said you could wait, and I did wait, and he told me about James Timson, and I thought, what a wonderful man. But equally, you've done a tremendous job. Keep it up, you've done wonderfully well. Thank you.
Right at the back there, I think, Sheila.
I think that's always incredibly inspirational, how you've turned kind of the social norms on the head, really. So I've adopted 4 children. I know a lot of families in the local area who are either in the care system now or have been in the care system. They often have worse outcomes. Stoke-on-Trent hasn't got great outcomes in terms of education experiences for our children, relatively speaking, anyway. So what do you think universities could or should do to kind of make ourselves more inclusive for that generation that I feel we're failing at the moment?
Well, I would really prefer Trevor to answer that one. But I think I'm a big believer in don't really read the CV. Give people the opportunity. If you look at some of the blue chip accountancy companies now, PwCs and Grant Thorntons, they blind recruit now, so they don't care what university you've been to. They just want people who've got the right personality and the will to work. And I think if you want to recruit a really diverse group of students, you need to work really, really hard at finding where those people are and attracting them in. So with our prison work, we rarely have people who, like Anne, write to us and say, can we have a job? We have to go and find them, and it's worth our while doing that. And I think all institutions, if you want to have a more diverse group, you need to go and find them.
Thank you. I better shout. Oh, there you go. Thank you very much for an inspirational talk. After nearly 30 years also in recruitment, I concur with your thoughts about a CV, how not only useless but often misleading they can be, because at least one of your colleagues wouldn't have got through the CV-only process, and you're missing out, therefore. What I'd like to know is how many, any of you can answer this, but why other organisations, not just businesses, don't follow your model, and how much of your previous experience will allow you to transfer those methods to this university?
Okay, so I'll start and I'm going to hand over to Darren. The reason why lots of other companies don't do it is because they're scared of the reputation if things go wrong, and it's just easier for them not to. What most of them don't realise is there are 1 in 15 men in this country that have a criminal conviction more than a driving offence. So they're actually already employing people from prison, they just don't know it. So I think it's a case of being brave, but I also think that the sentiment in the world, in the UK, has changed now. So it's actually got to the point now, if you want to be a diverse employer and you're not recruiting people from prison, you're not a diverse employer. So we've sort of managed to add ourselves to the list of the types of groups we should be looking at. And I think there are lots of things the government can still do more of, but they're actually doing a pretty good job at the moment on encouraging employment from prison. So maybe I'm just going to hand over to Darren to talk about how other companies operate and how you onboard them.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So for the last kind of 11 years I've been with Timson, I've spent lots of my time trying to help encourage other businesses to follow our lead and to employ ex-offenders and recruit from that cohort of marginalised people. And it's been a tough sell for the reasons that James has mentioned. So essentially, lots of employers will view people with convictions as untrustworthy, inherently dishonest, they've got nothing to offer, they're going to cause chaos in the organisation. And it's been quite tough to get people over the line in terms of recruiting prison leavers. However, with the kind of perfect storm of Brexit and a pandemic, all of a sudden we've got an orderly queue of employers beating down our doors, sort of saying, please help us, we'll take anybody, we're just desperate for colleagues. So I'm quite cynical, so I'm thinking maybe they're not doing it for the right reasons. They're doing it essentially because they need people, but I think by and large it will move the agenda forward. So it's a good thing because it will create a kind of normalisation of giving people who are marginalised with convictions an opportunity. So the first thing we do when businesses come and ask us for help is that we invite them to one of our prison academies. And again, for people who've never visited a prison, it conjures up all these images of sort of big 6'4" guys full of tattoos, can't string a sentence together, all very dangerous and scary. And of course, prisons aren't like that, they're just a cross-section of society. Everyone in there is like us. I've been to prison, I was in prison for 4 years. Anthony's top trumped me with his sentence, but yeah, prisons are just like normal parts of our community, they're just a cross-section. So what we do is we take them in, they have a chat with the men and the women in custody, they find out that they would make great employees, and then we show them some of our wonderful colleagues that we've recruited like Anthony. And once they see them positive examples, they're kind of chomping at the bit to recruit more ex-offenders. So we've had lots of success over the years, and some big hitters as well, such as Greg's the Bakers. You've got a Greg's branch on the campus. Greg's probably just behind us, James, in terms of employing ex-offenders. And we help them start off on their ex-offender recruitment journey.
So to answer your question about the university, it's a combination of two things. Obviously, the staff who work here, we need to make sure that there's nothing in the HR process that stops someone with a criminal conviction applying. And they're often, from my experience of Tate and other organisations, there's actually nothing that says you can't recruit someone from prison, but there's lots of processes within that actually means it's very difficult for them to do so. So you need to look at your HR policy, but also it's having a goal of saying, right, let's recruit 10 prison leavers into the organisation in the next 12 months. And then from our experience, as soon as you get a small number in, then you're off, because everyone realises that they're just as good as anybody else. And so far as the student group goes, we're not short of prisons around here. So there's always ways that we can find to recruit people to come here as well. Sometimes they do need extra support. So one of the things to look at is what are the other financial mechanisms to support people from prison to study here. Next question, and then we'll go to you.
Just following on from that, when you were saying previously about the level of problems of recruitment into the prison services, the police now are recruiting on a graduate-only basis, which they're supporting, I believe, through some universities with apprenticeships. Would you see that as a possibility, and perhaps here to improve the performance or the income of the officers that are coming in?
Into the police officers, you mean?
No, I mean prison officers.
Okay, fine.
Would it be worth going up to that sort of level to apprenticeships?
Well, there's a brilliant scheme called Unlocked, which takes on graduates into the prison service to fast track them, which is incredibly successful. And I'm sure you've come across a lot of Unlocked graduates who are brilliant. The apprenticeship scheme, from our point of view as a retailer, is a complete disaster. The apprenticeship levy that we pay, and the millions of pounds a year we pay in an apprenticeship levy, virtually 98% of it is wasted. It's basically like a tax. So I think the whole area of apprenticeships needs completely overhauling because it specialises in certain sectors and is unfair on other sectors.
Where was it? Yep. There.
Hi, you talked a lot about culture at the beginning of your talk. I'd like to know what are your top tips on quickly assessing a culture and working out what it's like to be in one or another organisation, please.
Okay, the simple one is standards. So let me give you an example. 5 years ago, another retailer was having a difficult time, so they asked if I could come and spend a day with them to help them work out what the problem was. So I got to their office at 8:30 in the morning, no cars in the car park, litter everywhere, weeds everywhere. I knew they were in trouble. You've got to have high standards. And then I went into the reception, was greeted by a miserable receptionist, and just sat on a sofa that had marks all over it. And I thought, they ain't got it, because standards have got to be set for an organisation to be successful. So for me, you start off with standards. So that's why in our shops we have a thing called Perfect Day, where once a year, every shop has to be absolutely perfect. So it's nothing about the sales, it's about, is every drawer spotless, is every light working, is the toilet clean, all that sort of stuff. I've never known a great organisation have poor standards. You've got to start with the standards.
Thank you. That was a wonderful talk you gave to us, James. The most interesting part that I picked up on was the fact that you're a risk taker. And it seemed strange that I am as well, so I suffer from the same disease. But it's interesting to see how such a kind empire was built around risk-taking. How do you square the two?
Because we're entrepreneurial, the way my dad and I run the business, we're entrepreneurs. So it doesn't seem risky to us when we do something, but when you look back, you realise it was risky. Because at the time, we just could justify to ourselves why it was a good idea. And fortunately for us, more have worked. I mean, we've had lots of disasters, but more have worked than failed. And it's actually quite good having some disasters because it means you don't do the same thing again. But I've just learned that the most commercially advantageous way of running an organisation is to be kind. And you can be entrepreneurial on acquisitions and deals and where you invest money, as long as you keep investing money in the things that keep reinforcing this culture of kindness.
I was going to ask if you'd tell us about your worst disaster.
We haven't got long enough for that.
Well said.
We've got a question here.
Hi, thank you for a really interesting talk. I'm a sociologist of work, so I was really interested in your reflections on work and particularly on character. But just coming out of our period of marking that we've just had, I'm struck by the fact that we have some students who have fantastically sparky characters who really can't write an essay. And I'm just wondering what you would think about what we do in terms of fostering, in a way, character is the one thing that you can't teach. And perhaps for those students who can't write essays, we need to kind of cultivate and foster their other qualities.
Yeah, or you could send them to work for us. The letters I get from colleagues, I wouldn't say even my seniors, lots of my senior colleagues, their writing isn't very good. We don't recruit them because of how good they are at maths and English. We recruit them because of their personality. And I think for some people, it's about confidence, because a lot of our colleagues are not confident when it comes to writing. So it's more about building up their confidence as well as their skills, but don't forget the confidence bit, because they can get knocked. So for example, when we do our training courses, it's always just look at the pictures. You hardly ever have to write anything, because lots of our colleagues can't write, so don't put them in a position where they're going to feel uncomfortable.
Okay. I think two last questions, one there and one at the back, and then we'd better... Yeah. Lou first, and then there was one just here for Sheila. Just by you there, somewhere, I think, was there? Yeah. The back first, yeah.
Oh, hi. Thanks for a great talk. Some of us have backgrounds and work backgrounds in which kindness is unusual. And when we see it, sometimes it's hard to receive. Do any of you have some advice about how we can be better at receiving kindness?
I'll have a stab at that. So I'm a former detective inspector for Merseyside Police. So when I went to prison and ended up working for James, it was very, very different, shall we say, from being in the police force to coming to work in Timson House, when there was dogs running about, when there was people's kids riding around on trikes, when the ice cream man was outside and people were being bought ice creams. I thought, what the hell is this place? But just, yeah, it took me a long time to kind of soften, if you like. But I couldn't go back now. It's such a good place to work, and I think it's that authenticity of kind of kindness and compassion which runs through the sort of culture of our business. I couldn't think of working for a different organisation now. It would just be too difficult for me. But yeah, in terms of advice, in terms of accepting it takes time, depending on what background you come from. But you get used to it. I like being bought an ice cream and it's a hot sunny day. So.
Okay, and then one last one at the back.
Thank you for your talk. I'm a Keele student, and I wanted to ask, nowadays that we live in a world that we have free access to lots of information, lots of trends, and it's hard to keep sometimes values, and we don't really know. We just write sometimes what is not. So what would you think are the most 3 important values that nowadays a leader should follow?
Okay, so in simple terms, trust everyone, be kind to everyone, and have very, very high standards. If you do those 3 things, you'll probably be okay.
Thank you.
Okay, which sounds like a great place to finish. So, thank you, all of you again, for coming, but obviously a particular thank you, first of all, to James, but also Ant and Darren. I'm already talking with James around when his next lecture is going to be. I think you've already seen that we're going to have huge benefits and insights, and I think we will end up as a different institution by view of the input that James is going to put into Keele over the next few years. So that was a great round of applause, but can I thank you once again for thanking James, Darren, and